I am a conspiracy theorist. Yeah, it isn't about a white knight riding into DC like RFK Jr. presents himself as. I think he's controlled opposition. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if any kind of false flag they might pull. Yeah, I hope you've asked all the candidates these questions. This is a totalitarian state right now. This is a gulag system that's been established at the in our country. I'm not saying Trump's a legitimate outsider, but they don't want. They're not afraid of Trump as much as they are his followers and what the followers might do. Wow, you really put it out there. So yeah, I think that there are conspiracies. They do happen, and those two cases are very suspicious. You're gonna have me ruin me here. And what we need is decentralization, and that's why I'm in the race to present this argument for decentralization.
Welcome to 24 for 24, an interview series where I ask presidential candidates 24 pressing questions regarding the 2024 election. Today we are joined by Michael Rectenwald, a libertarian presidential candidate. Rectenwald is a PhD, former NYU professor, public speaker, columnist, entrepreneur, and author of a dozen books. Stay tuned and learn how he plans to wreck the regime. First question I want to start with, I'm a millennial. I think a lot of people listen to podcasts probably are too. Do you think that millennials are just complainers, or is the wealth engine that boomers benefited from really gone?
I don't think millennials are just complainers. I think that they have some real grievances that should be dealt with. And the fact that the current generation left them with a federal government, $34 trillion in debt, and that the culture has been degraded tremendously because of the Federal Reserve and their unfettered production of money, which leaves people with no incentive to save because money is devalued all the time. So there's no question that the millennials were left a real nasty basket of garbage that we need to address. And I don't think they're merely complainers. I think they have real grievances.
Next question is another kind of millennial-based question. Mm-hmm. For myself, friends, people I know, we get really tired of seeing Nepo babies succeed in pretty much every aspect in life. And you see that definitely in politics. Trump had his family all over the administration. Biden did. Would you pledge to not hire any of your family or friends in your administration? Because normally nepotism isn't merit-based. You don't get the best people.
Yeah, well, I have a very talented, I have 3 talented children, but they have no interest in working for me. And I'm not going to hire them. That's not really, first of all, I'm not going to be hiring them any people. I'm going to be getting rid of people. I'm going to get rid of departments. I'm going to get rid of the whole intelligence community, mostly like the whole FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and you name it. It's just going to go. So it wouldn't be about hiring people. It's going to be about firing people.
Would that be like Vivek Ramaswamy talked before about laying off about half the government, just going off of their Social Security numbers? Would you do that or something more drastic?
More drastic. I'm talking about whole departments gone, whole agencies gone. It would be eradication of the security state, the intelligence apparatuses, the board, the Department of Education, the CDC, the whole regulatory regime, all of it.
Okay, all the alphabet agencies. Okay. Move on to the next question. I got a few on COVID. Do you support a constitutional amendment to prevent the government from mandating any vaccine under any circumstance?
No, yes, I would never mandate anything that people would have to take, period. So I would support any kind of amendment that would make that forbidden, that you could not mandate anything for anybody, whether they're government employees, that includes the military, etc. No mandated vaccines, no mandated drugs, etc.
Okay, kind of answer the next question I was going to ask. Would you ever propose legislation to prohibit implementation of like mask mandates, COVID testing? But you kind of got that all in one wad. So we'll skip
Yeah,
past that one. Would you abide by or cancel the international health regulation amendments adopted or trying to be adopted by the World Health Organization so we don't have to kind of submit to the global authority?
yeah. The WHO pandemic treaty would be. I would make sure that that was not valid for the United States at all, and so that anything the WHO tries to implement on us through any kind of agreements with the WHO, first of all, I'd withdraw from the WHO and the UN altogether. So whatever they tried to mandate to us would not have any teeth.
Move along to a couple economic questions. What is your position on central bank digital currencies? Are they dangerous? Why do you think they're dangerous? Or do you think they have some sort of benefit?
I've written about this extensively in my recent most book, The Great Reset and the Struggle for Liberty. The CBDC represents it represents the closing of the totalitarian circle. It would be a complete control system whereby everything you spend, whatever you buy, all this would be known to the Fed and likewise to the federal government. So it gives complete transparency over all of your money. I would oppose it and never let it come into being. It is the worst possibility. It really does close the totalitarian circle entirely.
Could you kind of expand a little bit on, like, on a day-to-day level, why people shouldn't want CBDCs? Like you
Yeah,
say, close the totalitarian circle. Like, what would that mean on a day-to-day basis?
it would mean that every transaction you make would be monitored, would be surveilled, would be known, and they could preclude certain transactions altogether. So certain sellers could be limited from selling things at all. Furthermore, they could use it to track your carbon footprint. Could be used for carbon footprint tracking, which means that the federal government will know how much supposed carbon emissions you have participated in or emitted over a certain period. And they could limit what you buy based on that, gasoline, even meat. All those things are got to be, all that is terrible. We want to get the state out of the economy, not make it further entrenched and in total control of the economy.
Next question has to do with women in politics. This is called Ladies of Politics, after all.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much seems like women reject libertarianism. Pew has done some surveys on this before. Men are about twice more likely than women to identify as libertarian. There was a huge gap between male and female voters for someone like Rand Paul, who was like the mainstream kind of libertarian candidate in 2016. But libertarianism kind of came from women. Ayn Rand was a big influencer back in the day. What happened from like kind of the founding mother, you might say, or mothers, because there's a few other women that helped get libertarian ideology going, to now it's a brofest, for lack of a better term? How do you think the party's failed to appeal to women, and how would you remedy that?
Well, there's a couple factors there. Without getting into like psychographic or issues, which we could delve into somewhat. There is some evidence that women are more prone to support the welfare state, and to support like social programs, to be more in support of censorship over free speech because they feel that people's feelings shouldn't be hurt and stuff like that. So there's that. But there's also a cultural problem in the Libertarian Party. I think that it needs to become less of a brofest, less of a dick swinging contest, really, and more about the issues and how libertarianism would benefit everybody, not just women, but everybody, including women and their children. And I think that once that is understood, that it promotes wealth production, and that everybody's lives would improve economically, because the government is the worst uh, custodian of the economy that there is. And whenever you produce more, whenever you supply more money to things like social welfare, you get the problems, you get more of the problems that you mean to address. So you get more people on welfare, you get more homelessness, you get more drug addiction, you get more of anything you throw money at. That's just an economic law. So once you stop doing that, then you don't produce that which you supposedly want to ameliorate, which is really what the whole Democratic Party's platform is about. They're about ameliorating supposedly all of these problems, like homelessness, like poverty, like drug addiction, like other things, and we can see what in fact their policies lead to. All you have to do is look at Democratic cities and see what a disaster they are. Democrat controlled cities, which is most of them, if not all. And you see that, in fact, they increase the very issues, the problems that they mean to redress. But, I mean, there is a problem within the Libertarian Party. I think it needs to be more welcoming. It needs to be less, shall we say, androcentric in its approach and in its language. I think that's a problem. And I've been saying this for a while, that the way we attract women is not through this kind of muscular, insult factory, really, that Libertarian Party can represent to some people. I think it's not welcoming enough to people. It's not showing people its compassion towards others. It's kind of like anytime somebody comes along, they're treated to insults and things like this. This can't be the way the Libertarian Party operates.
Now, next question, I know pretty much now you're going to answer. It's about the war on drugs. Mm-hmm. What actions would you take to end the war on drugs, and what drugs would you legalize? I can tell you're vaping, so I'm sure you're going to love marijuana.
I would legalize all. Well, instead of talking about it in terms of legalization of drugs, I like to talk about it from the standpoint of the sovereignty of the individual adult, to put into their bodies whatever they deem, except, whatever they deem necessary, or whatever they want to put in their bodies. That being said, I would make drugs legal so that people would know exactly what they're getting. So that you'd have legitimate manufacturers of drugs putting on their drugs labels that tell you everything that's in this. If you get rid of the black market, you get rid of all these deaths by fentanyl and all these other impurities that come with the way drugs are made in the black market. The black market is driving. It's not only driving deaths through fentanyl and other problems, and it's of course driving a lot of the problems with immigration. It's also leading to, I think it actually increases addiction by virtue of the fact that people don't know exactly what they're getting. When you had proper labeling made by legitimate manufacturers, you'd know what you're getting. You'd be told that this such substance is addictive. You could even have a whole booklet that would tell you all of the symptoms that might come along with it, side effects, etc., just like they do with pharmaceuticals. So why wouldn't that be the case for all drugs? And that's where I think I would approach it. I would try to make legitimate manufacturers take up the production of all drugs and the distribution of all drugs. And that is legalization or decriminalization, both actually, and get rid of drug laws so that you don't have the war on drugs. You don't have people dying in these battles inside cartels. You don't have people dying from fentanyl overdoses, etc. I had a very close friend of my family die of a fentanyl overdose when they had no idea that what they were consuming had fentanyl in it. And I think it's a travesty. If legitimate production of drugs was made available to people, we wouldn't have any of these problems.
Would you get rid of the prescription process altogether for like all drugs, even ones
Yes.
now we have to have a doctor? Just eliminate that, so I could walk into a
Yes.
pharmacy and get a Xanax and not have to ask for a
Yes,
doctor.
absolutely. Get rid of prescriptions. All of the credentialing that goes along with the state and its control over all substances would be banished, would be eradicated.
Next one, a little bit more detailed on the criminal justice system. The U.S. incarcerates more people in sheer numbers and per capita than any nation in the world. That includes like North Korea. Our police are very militarized. Over 80% of SWAT raids are drug related. And we've had more than 180 people get exonerated from death row. Why is the criminal justice system so broken? And what would you do specifically to fix that?
Well, this is a police state. And there's a lot of criminalization of victimless crime. That's the first thing I would eliminate. I would, when in office, say I got by some miracle of miracles, I was able to win the presidency. I would release all incarcerated persons who are in prison for victimless crimes. So this is we've militarized the police. You're right, with military equipment, and also, it's coming down the pike. We're going to have robotic police, robot dogs, and other police, roboticized police enforcement, which will make it even impossible to appeal to anybody as a human being, and they'll undertake things that are utterly careless and callous and completely without feeling. So I would demilitarize the police. First of all, the way to do all this is to make policing strictly local. Get rid of the Fed, that is the federal police, the FBI, and get rid of all the centralization of the policing. Make it local. The more local it is, the better. Eventually, I would want it to be utterly privatized so that the state wasn't involved in this. I would want a complete private property society where we're self-governing, right? When the state is completely out of all governance, because it wouldn't exist. So I think people can be self-governing, and of course you can have private security firms, private courts. And all of this has been worked out by many thinkers, and particularly Hans Hermann Hoppe, and I follow on that trail.
You would support like having privatized prisons? There's no concern. You know how the left is pretty concerned about privatized prisons. I mean, I know you would shrink prisons and let people out, but those concerns don't bother you, that it would, we're paying for beds in prison, so we got to fill them?
No, I don't think that's how it would work. I think you'd have, everything would be privatized, but first of all, the crime rate would drop drastically because the criminality would be reduced in terms of the need for people to steal, to commit robbery, and so forth. There always are deviants in any society, so they have to be dealt with. So there has to be some form of punishment system. First of all, restitution would be number one. Restitution of anything stolen. And then, of course, in cases of capital crime, like egregious violations of the non-aggression principle, such as assault and murder, those have to be punished. So there needs to be some sort of a timeout, for lack of a better term, for people that commit these kind of crimes. And I think private doesn't mean that that you would have this proliferation. It's only the conjunction of the state with privatized prisons that produces this need to incarcerate more and more people.
Okay. Would you keep the death penalty and then let privatized companies carry it out, or would you eliminate the death penalty altogether?
I would eliminate it. I don't think the death penalty is humane at all. I'm pro-life all
Okay.
across the board.
I'm going to move on to some questions that may get some of these clips kicked off, flagged on YouTube. But when it comes to the 2020 election, do you believe it was stolen, either from fake ballots, mules, or rigged voting systems?
Yeah, there was a lot of ledger domain, for lack of a better term, right now involved. I think there was a lot of uh, interventionism. In fact, there was. I reread this Time magazine article in which they made it clear that they conspired to make sure Trump was not put back in office or kept in office. So yeah, I think that the election process was definitely sketchy. I think this has been the case, though. Both parties have done this. Both of the major parties have done it. I started a website in 2000, at the end of 2000, when I believe George Bush was installed. So they install whatever they think is necessary at the time, whatever the ruling class wants. They make it such that those persons are put in office, and they don't care about popular will. They'll overturn the popular will at a you know
Would it
without
play
much.
devil's advocate? If they're going to install who they want, is there any point in voting? Because obviously they're not going to want a libertarian in there to shut down the government and
Well,
shut down agencies. Like, is there even a point in voting if they're just going to install who they want?
I think it. My position is that what we need to do is make these federal offices really archaic and unnecessary, antiquated and unimportant. So if you have less power vested in the central government, the president wouldn't be so important at
Mm-hmm.
all. So the point is to decentralize everything, decentralize governance as much as possible. This way, it wouldn't matter. The stakes would not be so high for who is the president of the United States. And that's the way it should have been in the first place. That's what the Constitution really uh, was set up to establish sovereign states under a loose federation. I think the federation is now totally tight, and that is to say, centralized government has way too much power. It's a behemoth that's hanging over all of us and oppressing the whole population. So I would decentralize completely, getting the federal government's reach and penetration and power vastly reduced until it's eliminated.
But until that happens, like I don't have any trust that they're going to count the votes and do it accurately. I mean, like you've said, they want to install who they want. So how do you, I guess, justify getting in the race yourself if they're going to, until you can get in there and get an outsider that can decentralize
I'm in the
everything? What do we
race.
do in the meantime?
That's why I'm in the race. I'm in the race to tell the
Okay.
truth about the fact that top down solutions are not the answer. It isn't
Okay.
about a white knight riding into DC like RFK Jr. presents himself as, or Trump
Okay.
uh, as this kind of person that's going to go in and dismantle this or that. That's really not going to happen. What we need is decentralization, and that's why I'm in the race, to present this argument for decentralization.
What is your opinion on RFK? Just kind of on a side shoot here. You said like he presents himself as a white knight. Do you think he's completely phony?
I think he's controlled opposition.
Okay, the next one's kind of a whopper too. Protesters from January 6th have received a combined total of nearly 850 years worth of prison sentences. Individuals like Zach Real, Joe Biggs, Stuart Rhodes, and Enrique Otario received the longest sentences, ranging from 15 to 22 years. These sentences are longer than those given to the four people that received term sentences at the Nuremberg trials. So, why should January 6 protesters receive longer sentences than Nazis? And as president, will you commute or pardon all the nonviolent protesters?
Absolutely, all of them would be pardoned instantly. This is an outrage. This is political persecution. It has nothing to do with criminality. This is a gulag system that's been established at the in our country. What was the gulag in the Soviet Union? It was a place where they put political prisoners, not people that had committed actual crimes, but that deviated from the political from the party's orthodoxy in any way. That's what's happened here. And I said this on Forbes Forbes Breaking News in an interview there, and they gave me all kind of grief over this. But I think most of these people were at most trespassers, and at the very most, and that these sentences are outrageous. This is an outrage. And this is not to say that I support Trump or that I think these people were smart in supporting Trump. I just think that this is political persecution that must stop.
Okay. Do you think the powers that be are going to try to set up another January 6th before the election as a way to keep Trump out? I know you don't necessarily love Trump, but do you think they'll do another one just to try to set up his supporters for,
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if any kind of false flag they might pull in order to keep power. This is a totalitarian state right now under the particular, it's a uniparty, but the Democrats are the main leaders of this uniparty. That's who the ruling class wants in there. And they don't want to share power with any outsiders. I'm not saying Trump's a legitimate outsider, but they don't want, they're not afraid of Trump as much as they are his followers and what the followers might do. And I think that's what they're cracking down on most. Of course, they're going after him as a kind of example to them. Look what we can do to you if you oppose us. That's effectively what they're doing.
Do you think Trump is controlled opposition as much as RFK Jr. is? Do you think there's a little bit of truth in Trump, or do you think he's all just a horse and pony show?
If he is, he doesn't know it. Whereas I think RFK knows it.
Move on to international conflicts. Is funding Ukraine or Israel in their wars in America's national security interest? And as a little caveat to that, do you think that Israel is committing a genocide?
Yes. Let's start with the second question. Yes, they are.
Okay.
They're committing genocide, egregious violations of the non-aggression principle, using U.S. money and arms. It's an outrage. I would end all funding of Israel immediately, all military aid, all arms, period. And the same goes for Ukraine. I would end all military funding and arms to Ukraine immediately. So, yeah, all aid to these foreign countries, and it's not in our national security interest at all. This is all about doing it, in the case of Israel, doing their bidding, acting at their behest to execute their geopolitical objectives in the region. We talk about Israel as our greatest ally in the Middle East. To what end exactly is that the case? Since it's created all this enmity with other countries and non-state actors as well, so that we're bogged down in these battles and wars with various nation states, and we're on the brink of even heading into a war with Iran, and this could even involve Russia and China possibly. So this is just an outrage. I would end all that funding. We have no interest in Israel's wars at all. Israel's geopolitical objectives, whatever they might be. I mean, in some sense, you might say that the object is a kind of globalism headquartered in Israel. And I have no interest in that, and I would want it to be stopped.
Okay. How do you convince a lot of Christian conservatives who just seems like they'll support Israel no matter what they do, and they can't seem to flesh out this is a genocide? How do you get through to that type of wall to people that this is a bad idea? Because they're also pro-life, but they don't seem to care.
Yeah, I've been fighting with these Christian Zionists since this last episode, this recent onslaught by Israel on Gaza has unfolded. And they seem to be under a psyop, a Zionist psyop, campaign based on false eschatology and false understanding from a Christian perspective, even, of what the state of Israel represents. The state of Israel is not Israel from the Bible at all. The state of Israel is not, and the people in Israel are not the chosen people that were supposed to be Look, from a Christian perspective, anybody can be saved, but there's no salvation or any kind of special dispensation for people based on ethnicity, or even a religious adherence uh, to Judaism. That has nothing to do with Christianity at all. Christianity is a second covenant. It overturns the first covenant with the Jewish people, and it is based on belief in Christ as the Savior. And Jesus Christ, if you look at the Gospels very closely, at least the last third of all the Gospels are about Jesus being hunted effectively by the Jewish religious leadership. They wanted to kill him. They wanted him dead. So I try to get this through to these people. Israel is not the Israel of the Gospels. It's not the Israel of the Old Testament. It has nothing to do with this state of Israel as it stands right now. And, the eschatology that they're looking to execute, like establishing the third temple on the Temple Mount. We're now actually one of the holiest or most revered Islamic mosque stands is not the Christian eschatology that Jesus Christ preached.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. It makes sense. Yeah, it's a controversial opinion there. They're not the chosen people.
Well, there was a covenant made with the Israelites, but it wasn't the last covenant that was made. The last covenant was made through Jesus Christ, and that's the covenant that holds. And there's no special dispensation for any tribes. God is no respecter of persons. That's in the Bible.
How do you get Christians to grasp that? I grew up going to Baptist churches, and they are so locked into Jews are the chosen people, and whatever they do, we have to support them regardless. How do you break through that? Or do you think it maybe can't be?
Well, it all started with the Schofield Bible, and the way that the preachers have been indoctrinated into the Schofield Bible belief system, which was a Zionist psyop from the start. This was created by the Zionists, and they then got this rolled out into the Christian evangelical, particularly movement. I may be talking a little out of school because I'm not a theologian, but nevertheless, it's very easy to track this down. That the Schofield Bible is not. It's a heresy, and that I'm trying to break through a lot of these people, as basically all the time. I've been arguing this for months, and even with family members, frankly.
Have you ever won anybody over to your side?
They kind of go way flummoxed, and they don't necessarily, or they'll call you not my family members, but other people will call you an anti-Semite for things that now that anti-Semitism has been equated with anti-Zionism in an official congressional hearing and a congressional resolution. It's just ridiculous. So there's no connection between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism necessarily at all. So I try to get that across too, that Zionism was a rather modern project. It was mostly secular and communist to begin with, and it didn't have any biblical sanction at all.
Do you think if the Jewish lobby stopped funding candidates that politicians will change their opinion on this issue overnight, or do you think
Not
they've just
overnight.
kind
It's
of been
going to take.
brainwashed too on Zionism?
It takes a while to deprogram people. They have to be debriefed, deprogrammed out of this cult that they're in.
Next question, we'll move on from that. Kind of take a macro view of foreign affairs. So we currently have around 750 bases in more than 80 countries, a military budget this year of more than 1.5 trillion. And Obama, he launched more than 1,800 drone attacks during his tenure. Trump went way past that just within the first couple of years, and that's killed hundreds of civilians. Biden he's doing less drone strikes, but he's got us in 2 international conflicts.
Yes.
Would you sustain, shrink, or swell our military footprint around the world? I think I know your answer, but
well, I would withdraw our troops from all of these bases, and I think it could be as many as 900 actually. There's
Okay.
many secret bases as well as the ones that we know about. I would withdraw all the troops. The military budget would be shrunken dramatically. The only function for the military would be defensive, and that would be necessary to reduce the footprint of the U.S. throughout the world, which only gets us into entanglements and wars that has no benefit for the actual American public at all. It only benefits the ruling class and their military industrial beneficiaries. It has no benefit for us.
Parental rights. Does the government or the parents have the ultimate control over a child? And if it is the parents, isn't banning gender-affirming surgeries a violation of parental rights?
No, I think the more primary right is the right of the child to be protected from aggression, the non-aggression principle. But I don't think a child can consent, for example, to transgender surgery or even gender so-called affirming drugs. I don't think that children can make that determination. They are not capable of consent. Likewise, I think that even parents don't have a right to allow gender affirming care, so-called, for anyone under 18 years old. At 18, then it's up to the person themselves. They have the ability to give consent to anything like surgery or gender affirming drugs, puberty blockers or conversion drugs, but not before then.
Next question is about disaster management. In the last year, we had 2 major disasters, the Maui fire and then East Palestine train derailment. Both of them have caused some people to feel like there's distrust in the government. Maybe something more was going on. Do you think there was anything nefarious going on with those incidents? And what would be a libertarian president's disaster response to those type of incidents?
Yeah, that's great. Wow, you really put it out there.
I do. I go right for it.
Isn't it interesting that the derailment happened in East Palestine? I'm sorry, that just strikes me as too weird. And I got to be honest, that means that says something to me. There's some sort of weird resonance there. So I think that the East Palestine train derailment was very sketchy. I don't know what's going on there, but the treatment of the people in East Palestine and in Hawaii with that particular disaster has been terrible. The federal government has been utterly useless, if not worse, especially in the Hawaiian case, where they won't even let people take back their property and build on it. So what's going on there? And how did these people's homes burn while other edifices did not? Come on, I mean, something very awry, okay? So the Wana crisis or catastrophe is sketchy. I want to know what the federal government's up to. And I would like to be able to uncover. I am a conspiracy theorist. and, and I make no bones about that. So I like looking into these conspiracies, but I didn't go down too far into the rabbit hole on these two. When I say I'm a conspiracy theorist, I think conspiracies do happen, and that the label of conspiracy theory is a way of deflecting from the wickedness that the government undertakes in many cases. In fact, the very phrase was mobilized by the CIA in the first place in conjunction with the JFK assassination. Although I've dug into evidence that it goes back further to Karl Popper in his book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, where he started to poo-poo this idea of the conspiracy theory of society. And then I found out that Popper apparently had some, shall we say, uh, connections to the CIA. And so, yeah, I think that there are conspiracies. They do happen. And those two cases are very suspicious.
How would you have handled him as president? Like, it happened. Let's say there was no conspiracy. You got a train wreck. You got the line of fires. What would you have done differently
Well,
than what Biden did?
first of all, in the case of the train derailment, the companies that were responsible should have had their asses sued off and then investigated for the malfeasance they might have been engaged in. And so I would treat it from a legal standpoint in terms of a class action suit against those companies. And furthermore, uh, the treatment by the federal government was just outrageous. They did nothing. So, like I said, with decentralization and so forth, you would have much more power at the local level to address these issues, and the people would be able to address them through their local government. The federal government would not be needed so much, and it wouldn't be able to cover up whatever happened either in both cases.
Okay. Before we jump off of conspiracy theories, do you think Alex Jones is controlled opposition? Because I've thought that for a while, that he's not really authentic anymore. I think he used to be. He's kind of the leader of all the tinfoil hat wearers. I was just wondering, do you think that he is controlled?
He's mostly entertainment. It's an entertainment function that he serves. I don't think that if anything, he kind of diffuses the tension and the pressure. He's kind of like a valve, a pressure valve that lets off steam and effectively does nothing with reference to anything.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
okay, pretty useless then, right?
Yeah, I mean, he even addresses the question about whether he's a Zionist shill, and I'm not going to go that far as to say he's a Zionist shill, but I think he's an entertainer, and his function is to as a what's that valve called, a release valve, a pressure release valve, and kind of a deflector away from really investigating and getting to the bottom of things.
Okay, so
there's things that he says that are true. You cannot go far if you don't mix some truth in with what you're talking about. The Great Reset is real, for example. They do want to depopulate the planet. There's no question about that. And all of those things that a lot of those things that he talks about are correct. But what's the function that he serves with reference to them? That's the question.
Okay, so just a wild man that kind of got lucky and gets to not control, just entertains.
Well, put it this way. In my book, The Great Reset and the Struggle for Liberty, I have a set of steps that we can take to thwart it. What are his steps to thwart it? Where does he ever recommend doing anything about it? What does he say to stop it? I have a plan to stop it.
Okay, I want to ask you about EMPs, electromagnetic pulse attack. If one happened,
I hope you've asked all the candidates these questions.
Oh, I am. It's the same 24. I'm going to get more interviews with other candidates. Oh, yeah. No, it's not just you. I'm going to go after everybody. When it comes to an EMP, estimates
Yeah,
say that about 90% of the population
yeah,
would
yeah.
probably die in about a year. Do you think that we're getting closer to having an EMP attack because we're getting involved in these other, like Russia and Israel, Ukraine? And what would you do to put America back together if we had one without invoking martial law?
I have to say that I am not
Okay.
conversant enough to talk on this. I just don't know enough, and I'm not
That
gonna.
works.
I'll
Yeah,
say
no
I
point in
don't know.
answering if you don't know. Okay, next one should be pretty straightforward about pardons. On day one, would you pardon Julian Assange, Ross Ulbricht, Edward Snowden, and Donald Trump? That is, if Trump is ever found guilty.
Yes, all four. Yep, including Trump. I have no animus towards Trump like some of the other libertarian candidates. He didn't commit any crimes, in my opinion, and also all his civil cases are bullshit too. In fact, they're property rights infringements. Yeah,
What is the deep state? Does it exist? Who is it? How would you eliminate it? I know your slogans wreck the regime.
right. The deep state is a shadow government that has its own objectives and that is not just the bureaucracy, but it's the intelligence community, and it has objectives that lie outside of anything close to the democratic process. These are not democratically elected people. Um, I think they have an agenda. It's one of the challenges to find out what it is, uh, and they execute plans completely. A lot of times, completely plans that are completely unknown to the so-called electorate, and they are both below and above the state that exists above the democratic process and below it. That they operate clandestinely, and they have an enormous power. Um, that's part of the regime that has to be wrecked.
Do you think it's mostly contained in the CIA? Do you think that's like the nucleus of it, or do you think
The
it's
CIA, in connection with other intelligence agencies,
okay?
the CIA, the Five Eyes, of course, that's Britain, Australia. Who else is in the Five Eyes? Israel is definitely involved, Mossad and other agencies. So I think their center of operation is probably the city of London. That's their financial hub.
Okay,
I'm not going too much further.
that's okay. That's okay.
You're gonna have me ruin me here.
Hey, that's what. Hey, why not ruin her career, right? That's what women do. We ruin things. Abortion. When does life?
Abortion?
Yeah, when does life
Yeah.
begin? And if it starts in the womb, do you support a national abortion ban?
Uh, I think abortion is a gross, egregious violation of the NAP, the non-aggression principle. I think every human person, regardless of their size, uh, stage of development, or level of dependency on another person, is a human being, and they have ownership of themselves that should not be violated. That being said, I would not propose some sort of state action to stop it and criminalizing it and putting women in prison or jail over it. I think it needs to be treated from a spiritual standpoint. It has to be treated with a crusade of awareness, and I think it's very important to point out where this all comes from. The history of abortion and the movement of depopulation or neo-Malthusian population control. If you point this to people, you show people, who are these people that want you to abort your kids? Who are these people and what is their agenda? This goes a long way of disabusing people of the idea that it's my right. It is they're actually getting you to kill your offspring. That is very serious. They're getting you to kill your own offspring. That's what's happening. And this comes from this is a part of the agenda. The global agenda is to reduce the population, control the population, and I've shown in my book, The Great Reset and the Struggle for Liberty, this neo-Malthusian population control and reduction plan. And if people could see this plan and to know that the earliest proponents of abortion were eugenicists, like Margaret Sanger, that she was an eugenicist who wanted to get rid of black people's babies largely. If you could show them this, then maybe they'll wake up to this agenda and will not want to participate in it. They think they're being empowered, but they're actually being utterly disempowered. Whenever you take away somebody's ability to reproduce, you have controlled them to an extent that's hitherto unimaginable, really.
So would you have preferred to have left Roe v. Wade kind of in place? Do you think that was a mistake of the court?
No. I think it's a good thing that it went to the states, and that's a good step. But I think it's got to go further. It's got to go further down into the individual consciousness.
Okay. Do you think Alabama went too far with the recent frozen embryo debacle, saying that as a child? Do you think they took it too far? Like taking their state's right to get involved?
Well, that makes it look absurd. That's the problem. I would say a frozen embryo situation is not a viable human yet because they're not in the womb. They're not in a developmental stage. So I think that is absurd. So I think they do things like this in order to make the whole issue look absurd. And that's the problem. I know people that are doing in vitro fertilization that have frozen embryos, and I don't think discarding a frozen embryo is the equivalent of murder. I think that when you take a viable individual in the womb and extricate them without taking into consideration their personhood, that I think is when you've crossed the line.
Next one, you've kind of already answered it, kicked it around. Is the government too big? I know you've talked about decentralization. So like maybe specifically, how would you shrink it? Could you give me the 5 agencies you would get rid of right off the top of your head?
Right off the top, it would be the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the Department of Education, the CDC. Is that 5? I think that's 5.
When it comes to the border, do you think there's a crisis? And if you do, how would you secure it? And what would you do with those people that have already come to the country illegally?
There's a crisis. It has to do with this. First of all, let's talk about some of the precursors that go into this crisis. U.S. interventionism in other countries, political and military, have created this crisis largely. So we have all these people that have their homelands have been ruined. Their economic viability has been undercut, and likewise they want to flee those areas. That's our doing. Second of all, the drug war has created a lot of this. The underground black market of drugs has created this. A lot of the problems that we see in terms of immigration, smuggling of people and smuggling of drugs, using people as kind of like what do they call them? What do you call a drug smuggler?
Like a drug mule?
A mule. Yes. Using people as mules. That's another part of it, which would be handled with the drug. With getting rid of the making drugs a black market by making them, legalizing them. And then the third thing, which is not as popular to talk about amongst libertarians, is the incentivizing of immigration with social welfare payments. So they're actually baiting people into it using social welfare, telling people, and they get these messages all over the world, in Central America and elsewhere, that once you get into the country, you're going to get a check, or you're going to get a credit card, or you're going to get a payment. And these people are like, well, that's great. I get to go to the United States with a credit card balance and so forth. So they're baiting these people in. That's a big problem. I would end all that immediately. So social welfare. And then, so my plan to deal with it is, I think immigration ought to be undertaken on an invitation basis, in which individuals, companies, whatever, they invite people in and they assume liability, financial liability for them. So people would be invited. That's how it should be done.
I want to talk to you a little bit about crime. The left tries to say that, oh, the crime is really not that bad. It's not really happening. They deny it. The right goes completely insane on Fox News. Sometimes I feel like they're just making stuff up to be sensational.
Yeah.
I know in my little tiny town here in Ohio, we're even starting to get warnings at like the Sheetz gas station pump on the handle, and like when you pump, to tell you to lock your stuff up because it's so dangerous. So something's going on. How big of a crime issue, how big of a problem is it? Like, which way do you swing, and how would you fix that as president without having a police state?
Yeah, that's a good question. So here's a phrase that's used, that was coined to describe what's happening. And it's not popular amongst libertarians because it didn't come from libertarian circles. It came from a guy named Sam Francis, who was a neo or paleo conservative, really. He called it anarcho-tyranny. So what it is what they're doing is letting criminality run rampant while harassing, taxing, and otherwise controlling the other, what we'd call law-abiding people, and allowing criminals to terrorize those people as part of a state project to keep the population in line, to keep them frightened, to keep them under control, and to create some level of chaos that the state will then come in and remediate through military type interventions. So, yeah, there's a problem. It's serious, and I think it's purposeful. It's actually being curated, really, for lack of a better term, by the state itself. The way I would treat it is by allowing people to be armed without having to be concealed carry or whatever, allowing people to be armed and to allow them. The other element about anarcho-tyranny is that they don't allow the people to defend themselves or their property. They go to jail for this. So they prohibit you from self-defense. You could see this in many cases where people that try to defend themselves, they end up in jail. And the criminals run free. The ones that initiated force, the ones that initiated violence, either against persons or property, are let out of jail almost instantly, while those who try to defend themselves and their property, and sometimes other people, as in the case of the New York subway guy that tried to wrest this man to the ground and hold him in a headlock to keep him from violence against others, he's going to face a real trial. That was not dismissed. So here we have criminality allowed to run rampant, self-defense made prohibiting self-defense of property and person, and so forth. So I would say localize all protection, allow people to bear arms without any sanctions against it, to protect their rights, and any egregious violations of the non-aggression principle are punished.
Get a gun, basically, right? That's the solution.
Yes, you should be armed.
Okay. I take it you probably don't like the NRA that much because they're not really
No, they're weak
weak.
sauce, you know.
Okay, I want to ask you about homelessness because it's become a massive problem. Kind of started in the big cities, but I'm starting to see it in not the big cities. I don't live too far from Pittsburgh. So they're over Christmas and their encampments are right there as soon as you drive into downtown. And they just like cleared them out for the tree lighting ceremony at the city, kind of made a big deal about it. And then they were already back. How do you solve
Did you
homelessness?
say Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh.
Did
Yeah,
you
I'm just
say
a couple
Pittsburgh?
hours from it. Yeah, I'm up there every few months or so. Yeah.
I live in Pittsburgh. That's where I am
I
right now.
thought you were from Pittsburgh. Yeah. They
Yeah.
got that big record shop up
Yeah.
there I go to. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, homelessness is something that is being created by virtue of the fact that it's being rewarded and money. You know, basically every time the state tries to remediate something, it increases it. So that's really what's going on. And so you have to stop that. And then in terms of people being homeless, allow charity to handle those issues. Allow charity to handle it. And I don't mean these necessarily these charitable organizations that exist to pilfer money for the bureaucrats who run them, but direct individual charity, but no state, no social welfare for that's creating the problem that is supposedly being addressed. The more money you throw at it, the worse it gets. We see this in San Francisco with drugs and homelessness. The more money you throw at it from the state, the worse it gets.
Do you really think it can be cleaned up just through people's charitable giving? I'm not so sure. I think people are that charitable.
Well, once they cease being robbed by the government, they'll have a lot more money, right? I mean,
yeah.
The problem is people, X amount of money is robbed from people all the time. If you get rid of that, then there's more money to take care of people.
So candidates always promise a lot of stuff in their campaign. Trump promised to repeal and replace Obamacare. Obama promised to close Guantanamo Bay. Biden promised to stop building the wall, but the wall continues to get built. Guantanamo Bay's open, and Obamacare is still essentially the law of the land. Why should anyone listening to this podcast and hearing your ideas believe that you will follow through on any of them?
Because I'm not running a campaign about what I will do. This isn't about me riding into DC and undertaking all these things and saying that I will execute X, Y, Z. This is about me trying to lead a movement, not a campaign, but a movement of decentralization and get that message out and to get people to take charge of their local governments and then to nullify the central government's mandates and laws, the unconstitutional ones, and to get to self-governance. That's the key. So I'm not about top-down solutions. I'm about bottom-up solutions. So I'm not making any promises, really.
Okay. Well, we can't break if you don't make them, right? That's pretty much it I have. Do you have like any closing remark you want to say to voters or people listening, or tell people how they can support your campaign if they like what you said?
Yes. Look into my website, wrecktheregime.com. Get into the decentralized revolution movement, started by the Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party. That is the charge that I'm leading, and that's what we're trying to do. And this is the way to deal with the crises that we face, is decentralization. The globalists want to centralize everything. The only way to resist them is through decentralization. So the state is trying to execute a globalist agenda. So the only possible resistance to that is decentralization.
Now that you know where we've been, find out where we're going. Tune in to Ladies Love Politics, where you can stay informed without going insane.